Good morning and welcome. My name is Gary Blakely and I'll be your MC for today. I'm pleased to welcome those here in our community center and those joining on Facebook Live and YouTube to Kansas City Oasis. Since 2014, Oasis has been the premier secular alternative to faith-based communities. We welcome all, regardless of beliefs or non-belief, race, gender, sexual orientation, identity, or any other trait. We feel the human experience is better when it is shared, and we are so pleased that you have chosen to share it with us this morning. Oasis's 5 core values: people are more important than beliefs, reality is known through reason, human hands solve human problems, meaning comes from making a difference, and be accepting and be accepted. For today's program, our featured speaker is Diane Euston from the Westport Historical Society, and our musical guests are Beau, Aiden, and Maya Bledsoe. The community moment today will be from Sara Geelan. The Bledsoes, again, Beau, Aiden, and Maya. The Bledsoe Trio brings the spirit of the Ozarks to life through old-time fiddle tunes and classic country standards. I was prepared today with my cowboy boots. Featuring Maya Bledsoe on the fiddle, Aiden Bledsoe bass and vocals, and Beau Bledsoe is guitar and vocals. This family ensemble draws on deep American roots, traditions shaped by generations of music making together. Maya is an award-winning fiddler named Grand Champion at the 5th Annual Ozarks String Band Championship. And second place winner at the Kansas State Fiddling and Picking Championships. Aiden, a silver medalist at the Missouri State Music Festival, has served as principal bassist at Interlochen Arts Camp. Both Maya and Aiden perform regularly with the Poor Choices at the Ship in Kansas City. We've heard of the Ship. Beau Bledsoe, internationally touring guitarist and executive artistic director of the Ensemble Iberica, anchors the trio with rich musical experience spanning classical, jazz, and global folk traditions. Please welcome the Bledsoes.
Hello everyone, it's a real honor to be back. I absolutely love playing for Oasis. The tunes, we're going to play a quick 3 fiddle tunes for you. Does anyone know the Kansas City fiddler Betsy Ellis? Yeah, here in KC. Well, she's a very prominent American Ozark fiddle player. And her teacher was Violet Hensley, who is now 109 years old, still going, lives in Yellville, Arkansas. So what is being represented in these next few tunes is a matriarchal fiddle tradition from the Ozarks, handed down women to women to women. So Maya is the latest recipient of this style. And we're going to play Little Rabbit, Where's Your Mama? And Old Gray Eagle and Jawbone. Hope you enjoy.
That was excellent, and just another reminder of my regret for giving up the cello for the saxophone when I was in the 4th grade. All right, birthdays this week. February 25th is Leisha Jones. I hope I got the pronunciation right. Leisha, are you here? Yeah. And we still have an opportunity for you to sign up to attend a community group. If you haven't signed up for a spring community group, please do so today. Meetings begin the week of March the 1st and conclude the week of May the 10th. Community groups are a way to really get to know others in the Oasis community in smaller groups. This QR code is also in the lobby slideshow. I do have to recommend those nice smaller community groups. It is really a good way to get to know people. We got a pretty big crowd here today, so it's hard to meet everybody. But all right, and we will learn more about the Harris Kearney House during the featured talk today. There is room for 10 people to tour this house museum after Oasis about 2 p.m. To get on the list to reserve a spot, see the welcome table during coffee break or after our featured presentation. Admission is $10 for adults or $7 for seniors and students. Another activity after Oasis today is a family-friendly event of putting together jigsaw puzzles. Again, that's today at 1 p.m. right here in the community center. Tomorrow is our monthly Monday musical. We'll be watching and singing along to Mamma Mia. I've actually seen that movie, and I recommend it. It's a good one. And make plans to join the 6-week East Coast Swing Dance Classes, Tuesdays, March the 3rd through April the 7th. Options for beginners and intermediate dancers. And save the date, April 12th. We are collecting items for the silent auction. If you're an artist that would be willing to donate to the cause, we would be honored to accept and can provide gift in-kind donation receipts for all. More details will follow soon, including a potluck sign-up. Let's see. I'm sorry. Community moments. Community moments are an opportunity for a member of our community to present on a topic of their choice during a Sunday gathering. Topics can be related to your profession, hobbies, travel experience, volunteer experience, etc. Sign up on kcoasis.org or talk to Roger Pick. We need volunteers for March 8th and the 15th. And that brings us to today's community moment to be presented by Sara, Geelan, our president.
Hello. I feel like I was just up here. Before I get started, I do want to say that February 27th is Peter Milano's birthday, but I just put it on the schedule, so we haven't got it on there yet. So, Peter Milano, happy birthday on the 27th. So I'm Sara. I am the current president of Kansas City Oasis. Yesterday, we met, everybody on committees met for a strategic planning meeting. And what that means is that we met to come up with plans for 2026 and the things that we want to do. I'm going to go over that briefly. What I didn't think about when I signed up to do this community moment to update everybody on what we discussed was that it was yesterday and today's today. So there are no visuals, and if you're a visual person like me, then just go ahead and put yourself in sleep mode right now. And we'll wake you up in 10 minutes when it's break time. So all of these committees that I'm going to mention are things that anybody can volunteer for. So if something sounds interesting to you, let us know. send an email to the contact KC Oasis if you don't want to talk to an actual person, that we can hook you up with whoever. So, and we're coming up with better ways. That was one of the things yesterday, to get more volunteers. So I'm going to start off with the merch committee. So their goal for 2026, obviously the merch committee, what they do is they come up with all our merchandise, keep track of it. We have an online store that's on our website. And so their goal for next year, or this year, I guess, is to poll the community for new merch suggestions and ideas, and to put the store on Discord. So I'm not reading you all of the plans, I'm just reading you some of the highlights because, yeah. So, because I have no visuals and you're just gonna blank out on me anyway. Next, we have the philanthropy committee, and that committee basically is in charge of all of our activities in the community, as far as, we just recently did Habitat for Humanity. Tim had done a community moment on that. Habitat for Humanity, our blood drives, our service Sundays, which are every 5th Sunday when we're here and we do some kind of project here. So their goal was to come up with new ideas for Service Sunday, because that gets kind of hard to do something here and then take it elsewhere. So coming up with new plans for that. One of the things was kits for incarcerated people being released, toys for Pet Project, and their idea was to have somebody do a community moment like Tim did, where he talked about doing Habitat for Humanity and what that all involves, so that volunteers will know, kind of without going into it blindly, what to expect when they volunteer for these events. So we thought maybe that would help to try and increase volunteer participation. We have a lot of great ideas on things that we want to do, but sometimes we struggle to get volunteers to do those things, and some of them, like Habitat for Humanity, cap off at 6. So it's kind of just trying to find that niche in there. The Micah Mondays that we do every now first Monday is, I touched something, I'm sorry. That's still an ongoing thing, and we're trying to figure out how to promote that more, since it's an ongoing thing. The AV team has lots and lots of things that they're going to do for 2026, and a lot of them are going to involve some serious fundraising, so keep an eye out for that. One of them is a new screen and projector, and speakers in the foyer and in the basement. So, and they have a whole string of other things that they're going to do. Like I said, all of these things, all these committees are things that you can get involved with if it strikes your fancy. Children's program, they're going to do a lot. They're going to start doing a monthly theme and check-ins, and one of the other things that they're going to do is they're actually going to move the kids' room from back here downstairs. So that's going to be quite the endeavor, and they're probably going to need quite a bit of help for that. And I think Julie has set up some work days, or is getting ready to set up some work days to get that done. So that's going to be a big change. And they're also trying to increase volunteers for the kids' room to have 2 rotating every week. So 8 new volunteers for that. So if you want to volunteer for childcare, we do the background checks, we pay for that. So that's always something that's needed if you want to be back there with, or down there now with the kids. Fundraising. The goal for fundraising was to increase recurrent donors. Fundraising is in charge of all of the money making that we need to keep this place open, which is a lot. So the fundraising events we have plenty of, I think, but the object is to get more recurring donors and to figure out how to do that. So one of the ways they're going to do that is Julie is going to give a community moment where she explains how to do it in estate planning and corporate matching, and also be available to help people sign up, because some people, I think, are struggling with the actual part of doing it. So the new format, though, is really good. The Zephy does not charge us. So before, the format we had would actually charge us a fee, so not all of your money was coming here. But the new format with Zeffy, you can choose how much to donate to Zeffy, and all the rest of it comes here. But fundraising is always looking for volunteers too, because they have all those fundraising events. Community outreach. So that committee involves basically getting our name out there. One of the things we're talking about is maybe changing the name of that because it's kind of misleading, but that's all of our tabling events, Pride, any parades that we're in, interviews, media, all of that kind of thing, trying to promote ourselves the best that we can to get our name out there. So one of the things that we're going to do, we're going to try to get a volunteer to focus on increasing our social media presence. We're going to start putting outdoor signs and announcements for specific events because we're getting a lot of traffic from people that are walking by. So maybe if people know something's here where they don't have to go to the website first. So that was one of the other ideas. And the other thing that I'm gonna beg you guys right now, there's flyers up front, but to do reviews online. We have so many places where you can review Oasis and it pops up all the time, but there's very few reviews on there. And some of them are, you know, decades old, or not decades, decade old. So if you could just like pop on Google and give Oasis a good review, that would be super helpful. Care response. So the care response team is responsible for basically acknowledging life events, whether that be something is happening and you need food assistance, or you need resources, secular resources, or acknowledging that, you know, sending you a get well card, reaching out to people that haven't been here, putting up signs in people's yards just to acknowledge that we're thinking of them. This committee, to me, is one of the most important ones because that's the one that, you know, keeps us all united when somebody's going through something. We can always use volunteers for that. So right now, what we're thinking about, I know that a lot of people don't know about care response or what they do, so the idea was to come up with a poster that we will have out every once in a while so that you don't have to ask somebody about it, and that you can just look at the poster, see what's available, and how to contact somebody if you want to. And then having a list of resources in the library available for people who are just looking for different kinds of assistance. Okay, we're getting to the end, I promise. Volunteers. So volunteer management basically covers the greeters, the coffee makers, the donut picker-uppers, all of those things, and including when we clean up afterwards. I know I'm umming a lot. I'm really unprepared, I'm telling you. So we've got, in addition to the greeters, we also have ambassadors, which the greeters are getting people signed up and letting them know where, you know, everything is, but the ambassadors are kind of going to be more involved in that they can tell people about community groups or introduce them to other people, find out how they, you know, want to be involved if somebody is open to that. That also came up that a good idea to recruit volunteers would be to have a clickable calendar that has all of our events on it, which apparently already exists. So I'm Sara, I am your president of Kansas City Oasis, and I just found out yesterday that we have a clickable calendar that has all of our events on it. So if you go on our website, there is a calendar that has all of our events, and we're going to start adding things on there like volunteer opportunities and that kind of thing. And for volunteering for any of the things out there, ambassador, coffee maker, all that stuff, we're gonna have a detailed instruction manual or vacuuming or whatever that tells you where everything is and how to do it, so therefore you're not signing up for something and then like having to find out where everything's at. So hopefully that will make it easier for people to I'm looking at Jason. Am I good? Okay. All right. The other committees that I'm not going to go over that exist are building maintenance. They've got a ton of general improvements in mind. Building rental, so that involves basically everybody, every rental that we do. Community groups, which I think the sign up is still going on. I think it's about ready to end. But community groups are the small groups that are at people's houses. So if you want to get to know somebody, that is the best way to do it. Get online and sign up for the community groups or ask somebody here how to do it. And social. And that's the group that plans all of our social events. And that's pretty much it. Kind of, sort of, not really, but that does it. But if anybody wants to volunteer or any of those things interest you, let us know. Or like I said, go on to the Contact Kansas City Oasis website. I'm sorry, I'm really distracted. I don't know if you can see this behind you, but anyway. Okay, that's all for me.
I think you did good there, Sara. So, all right. Let's see. Got a blank slide. There we go. Have you always wanted to dress up as a dinosaur? Well, here's your chance. During coffee break, talk to a dinosaur to find out what it's like. We need about 30 adults to dress up as dinosaurs for the snake parade. Costumes provided, or walk along as helpers in the North Kansas City Snake Saturday Parade on March the 14th. Kids' costumes are also available. Let Denise Decker know if you want to join. It's a lot of fun. We've done it, and actually, Sara just talked about fundraising and things. We did really well last year. They award prizes to the participants in the parade, and it was very good for Oasis last year. So we'd love to have you come out and help and support us. All right, that brings us to the coffee break. Be sure and introduce yourself. You see some new faces. I'm seeing lots and lots of new faces over the last several weeks, so we're so glad to have you if you're here for your first time. And if you've been coming for years, you need to find the people that are here for their first time and welcome them. So, all right, let's get going. the way, before the Bledsoes, as you're coming forward to play on our post coffee break musical number, I just want to let everyone know I have nothing against saxophones at all. I didn't mean that as a slam against saxophones, so okay. All right, the Bledsoes, if you'll come, we'd love to hear you play again.
I was talking to my new friend Daryl out in the coffee break, and he confessed to me that he absolutely hates country music. And I was like, I used to be the same, you know. I couldn't stand it. I grew up around it. And you know, when you're young, you really hate the stuff that your family's into. But when I had these, you know, two kids, and they used to have this great little bunk bed set up, and I would sing them to sleep, and lo and behold, what came to the surface were these sad honky-tonk tunes that I've been hearing my whole life. So, you know, you kind of have to go with it. So, we'll be playing some of these sad honky-tonk tunes. We have a regular thing at the ship. We're going to have a guest singer named Havila Bruders, whose specialty is Patsy Cline. That'll be Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Very friendly environment, great with kids. They have a two-step dance lesson, no line dancing. So yeah, it's a real good time. So we're going to continue with this North Arkansas tradition. There's a whole lot of Scotch-Irish kind of Celtic overlap with the repertoire from there. So this is a very old tune. I learned it as the Green Valley Waltz. And these are a few of the verses that my mother taught me. You know, it's one of those old songs that has hundreds and hundreds of verses. So this is how we're going to do it. And then Maya is going to play Violet Hensley's bowing in her style. Sorry for my singing.
Who's gonna shoot your pretty little feet? Who's gonna glove your little hands? Who's gonna kiss your ruby red lips? Who's gonna be your man? Papa's gonna shoot my pretty little feet. Mama's gonna glove my little hands. Sister's gonna kiss my ruby red lips. I don't need no man. I don't need no man, poor boy. I don't need no man. Sister's gonna kiss my ruby red lips. I don't need no man. Longest train I ever did see was 16 coaches long. The only girl I ever did love was on that train and gone. Who's gonna shoot your pretty little feet? And who's gonna glove your little hands? And who's gonna kiss your ruby red lips? Who's gonna be your man? And I'm gonna kiss your ruby red lips. I'm gonna be your man.
We all right? Okay. I started talking too soon. Yeah, I used to not claim to like country music, but I will admit that when the YouTube algorithm serves up Amarillo by Morning, I can't scroll past that one. And lately, my latest great find is George Jones. He stopped loving her today. So yeah, that's a great one. So all right. Speaker disclaimer. Our program is designed to generate conversation, engage our powers of reason, not as a forum to start debates. The following presentation has been prepared by our speaker and not by KC Oasis. Please respect the views of our speaker, and if you have any questions, a Q&A portion will follow. All right, Diane Euston holds a master's in history and education. Her thesis explored the life and impact of William Gillis, the founder of Kansas City. Diane is a published author, a seasoned speaker. She also teaches high school English, broadcast journalism, and the only high school class in Kansas City devoted to the city's history. Please welcome Diane Euston to tell us more.
Thank you. Should be. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks everybody for having me. I love the music. I just want to, almost a disclaimer, when I got my master's from Missouri State, one of my first classes was Missouri history, which was actually my lowest grade. It's kind of sad. A B, to be clear. But then I took Ozarks in Missouri history. There's a book called, I knew I was in for a treat when one of the textbooks was called Hillbilly Hellraisers. So I learned quite a bit about Ozarks history, and there is a ton down there that really people should look into. This presentation I kind of designed because I am on the board of the Westport Historical Society, and I know some of you are going to go visit the Harris Kearney House. And if you don't go today, please go and see us. We're in the middle of a big capital campaign to make sure that the house is restored. It's the oldest two-story brick home in Kansas City, built in 1855. But the reason it was built there in Westport, in this neighborhood, is because of the Santa Fe Trail. So I like kind of telling people, like, it's really important to realize that Kansas City, just like today, just getting here, I could have taken 3 routes according to Google, right? Just back in the old days, it was the same way. There were different routes of the Santa Fe Trail, and it's really fascinating to kind of see where they were and then to see how kind of we grew as a city. So I'm not going to bore you with all my things, but if you want to know more about me, Google me. So we're going to look first at the original route of the Santa Fe Trail, which really is the founding of independence. And anybody that knows that image, if you're my age. And for the record, I make my students still play Oregon Trail online. You can do that. I had a kid not that long ago, 2 classes ago, that was like, Miss Euston, like, how am I supposed to get there? Like, where do I get gas? I'm like, your oxen are your gas. My God. So, any case, the three trails, Oregon, California, and Santa Fe trails, originally started in Old Franklin, which was flooded out, and then there's obviously New Franklin now, but it was the first highway to the west, and so it was opened up in 1821, and in 1827, independence becomes, like, founding of independence happens, and it, of course, develops as an outfitting spot on the Santa Fe Trail. And I know, I always say this to my students, I would rather certainly not walk, I would rather ride. And so the river became very important to not start in New Franklin anymore, not start in Old Franklin, but actually start closer to the west so your journey was shorter, right? Like, you could get on a boat and then get off at Blue Mills Landing and then get your outfitting supplies in Independence. And that was the first one. Then the second one is, of course, Westport Landing, which people get confused, and that term gets confusing because it's where Kansas City downtown is today, and then the town of Westport after 1833. So those are the trails. And then, we love maps, and I'm going to show this map several times, and it's kind of hard probably to see, but you can see the dots all represent the different routes of the Santa Fe Trail, and those all existed through time. And does anybody know what the longest stretch of the Santa Fe Trail is today, road-wise? Quiz. You can't answer. That's my mom. She's my unpaid research assistant. She knows the answer. It's, anybody? Warnell Road. So you can see it right there on the line running down. And that's one of the newer of the older routes. But in any case, that's the longest stretch that we have. And that would have been from where Westport Landing was to Westport, and then moving south where those two lines intersect, where Johnson, you can see the word Johnson. That's the town of New Santa Fe. That's where I grew up. So the town's not there anymore, but that was kind of what sparked my interest in history in general. So again, going to just kind of show a different version of that, a little darker so you can see it. So you got Independence, Kansas City, Westport. So the biggest thing was Blue River. You had to cross the Blue River, and if you played the Oregon Trail game, you had to do that also in 1848 is what it said in, and you had to cross that Blue River, and that was dangerous because, are you going to ford the river or not? And that was what was part of the reason why moving the route to the west made more sense, because then you would bypass the Blue River and you wouldn't have to cross it anymore. So the Blue River kind of runs right down the center of that map. So originally in Independence, you would take that darker line to the southwest, and then you'd have to cross the Blue River at today's Minor Park. And if anybody hasn't been there to see the swales, the impression in the earth, it is amazing. It's a National Historic Landmark. Then in the Red Bridge was actually built in 1859. The first Red Bridge was built in 1859, where that actual crossing was. And we're on bridge number 4 now, in case you didn't know. So that was the original, was in 1859. So that was the primary route later on, was you're going to go ahead and just take that route. And once they created the Red Bridge, it wasn't as dangerous. But the early traveling was dangerous. A lot of people died trying to cross over the waters, especially during flooding. So the later route that I'll talk about was the primary route. So you might have had that image back in the day. And then this one. Everyone in the party has died. I love hearing my kids. It's like I'm okay with like a little cuss, and you hear like, damn it. And then, like, snake bite. I mean, I love making them play the Oregon Trail. So there is still trail evidence, like I said before, in South Kansas City, where I grew up, because I grew up at 122nd and State Line. And the New Santa Fe Cemetery, if you ever can go there, ask me about the horse thief or Google it, because if you go visit the cemetery, you have to visit the horse thief in the corner. But there are swales inside that cemetery as well. So there's quite a few different pieces of evidence. J.C. Nichols, love him for, thanks for building the suburbs, but we lost a lot of the evidence of the trails because of J.C. Nichols. So the first, I talked about the original route, right, which was from Independence, and then you have to cross the Blue River. But the later route became Westport Landing to Westport. This is really what got Kansas City on the map, or what would eventually get Kansas City on the map. So again, back to our route map. I like the visuals. Let's try to be important as possible. That Santa Fe Trail, now the route I'm talking about is going to be close to downtown Kansas City, where you see the dot where it says Westport Landing. So again, would you rather walk or ride? And then you have the dangers of the river, but that was not nearly as dangerous as having to go overland. And we're talking about cutting 18 miles, which is like an over a day and a half journey, and that's without a lot of supplies. So people who were traveling really wanted to start using this route. And as Western expansion happens, which I cut all this out, I just pretend you all already know. But as Western expansion happens, the Santa Fe Trail was a commercial highway. It wasn't a, like, take your family on the Santa Fe Trail. That was the Oregon and California trails, right? So they all merged together right here in Kansas City, which is what created the 3 trails. And I can argue with anybody who was born and raised in St. Louis that we're the gateway to the West, by the way. Okay, so I talk a lot, does anybody remember McCoy's in Westport? May it rest in peace. Great old brewery. That was named obviously after John Calvin McCoy. He's the founder of both Kansas City and of Westport. He's one of the original founders. And his history he's incredible. And you can go online and actually read some of his writing. He wrote a collection of memoirs later in his life called Tales of an Old Timer. And it is fascinating. I use him quite a bit in my writing because he's a primary source. You know, you get a lot of secondary information down the line. So he, like a lot of the white folks, as I say, who came to the area, they came because of the exploration of for cheap land. But he was one of those people, like the guy I wrote my thesis about, William Gillis. He's one of the guys who ends up in the area because of Indian removal. So Kansas territory was Indian territory, right? And so prior to 1854, when Kansas is about to become it's going to become a territory, that's where we relocated the Shawnee, the Delaware, the Piankashaw, the Weas, all of the tribes, Wyandots, all into Kansas territory or Indian territory. The reason that most of them settled near the western side or the eastern side of what is now Kansas is because it was closest to civilization. And that's the main reason why that you got like your tribes that kind of gathered in that area. So the reason that McCoy ended up in the area is because his father was a Baptist minister. And his father he followed the Native American tribes. So they followed them out west to essentially where Indian Territory is today, where Kansas is today. His father was vehemently against slavery. John McCoy, adopted to the times and became a slaveholder. I mention those things because a lot of times, I said to somebody earlier that I gave a presentation about on my thesis, William Gillis, and afterwards they said, that was kind of woke. And I said, oh, thank you. I'm a revisionist historian, and what that means doesn't mean erase. That means we have to look at things from all perspectives now. We cannot look at it. We have the white man's perspective because they're the ones that wrote stuff down, but we need to expand our knowledge and make sure we understand all the various cultures and the things that were going on at the time. So that's a revisionist. So when people go, oh, that's scary, you're trying to change history. No, we're trying to actually make it told in the way it should have probably originally been told. We have McCoy's writings, and it's great, but we don't have the Native Americans and what they thought at the time, right? We don't have a lot of that. So his father ends up buying land where St. Luke's Hospital is, like Hospital Hill area, okay? And he builds a log cabin there, and the reason they're right there on the border is because they can't legally buy land in Indian Territory, but they need to be near where they're making their money. Because again, it's all a marketing and money issue here. McCoy was trained as a land surveyor, so he already knew how to map stuff out. That was to be like an early engineer. And so his father used him to survey Native American lands. And his father, Isaac McCoy, when you go to the house, if you go to the Harris Kearney house, we actually have books that were originally Isaac McCoy's. We have John McCoy's books. We have Bibles from them and several pieces of furniture that came from the McCoy family. So they had these major Native American connections, but I look at it as they're still there making the money off of the Native American tribes. So John McCoy and his father were actively in Indian Territory surveying the land so they could move there. And when the trails start coming through, because of course they didn't care who was in the land or who owned the land when they were traveling west, they were going through Kansas, they were going through Indian Territory. McCoy saw a business opportunity. And so where his father's house was, the log cabin, not too far away on the edge, there was an old tavern called Yoakum's Tavern. And taverns back in those days, yes, they were a place where you got your whiskey and and a lot of fighting happened, but they were also a place where you rest your heads. They also worked kind of as inns, so they're almost like hotels. There was one called Yoakum's Tavern, and it was just like a small log cabin. So he buys this up because it's on the Santa Fe Trail, and he's like, I can open my own store here, and I can sell to the Native Americans just over, 2-3 miles away, and I can sell to these white folks that are coming to Jackson County. So he actually buys this and wants to outfit or put goods in his store, but it's 18 miles away from Independence, and at that time, where would you have to get your goods from? Independence, and I'm not walking there. And then you're bringing all the goods back, so a lot of weight. So this was like a big endeavor for a man to open this place in the middle of nowhere. It took him 3 days to get to Blue Mills Landing, which is Independence Landing, to his store in what would be Westport. And he goes, this is too far. I got to find a way around it. We don't have any photos of stuff. Kansas City loves to tear stuff down. But we do have a couple drawings of Yoakum's Tavern. So you can see on the left is like going to show you what he would have purchased, and then on the right is really as it was more functioning, as McCoy ended up living there too. It's the first permanent building in Westport. It stood at Westport Avenue and Mill Street. So it's going to be, there's actually kind of a sign for it. It says McCoy's Business, which really was Yoakum's Tavern. So this is the first building in your neighborhood. But what he needed to do is make it more accessible to get his goods to his little business that no one was frequenting. And nobody wanted to move, like he wanted to start a town. And the problem was there was no way to get goods. So he actually platted out Westport in about 1833, the town of Westport in 1833, and he had to give away lots to get people to like move there. So it wasn't hopping because it was too far away from civilization, from independence. So in 1834, he noticed something, and I had to skip over a lot of this because of time, but our earliest settlers, white settlers in this area, were the Chouteau family, St. Louis Chouteau family. And they had started a trading post at where basically the foot of Grand Avenue is today. So Grand Avenue ran into the water. So think of the Kit Carson Bridge is probably the best way to say it. And there was a landing there that they would have a ferry crossing, and they also had a trading post there. And so McCoy, I don't know why it took him so long to figure this out, because I feel like if there's a place where you can cross a ferry crossing, that would mean you could dock a boat there. He's like, hey, wait a minute, I need somebody to take a risk here and drop my goods that I would have to go 18 miles and 3 days travel. I need them to drop those at this landing spot where the Chouteaus got this trading post. And so he actually convinces the captain of a ship called John Hancock to take the risk, and instead of dropping the goods in Independence and dropping them at what would be Kansas City. And that was about 1834. That became then the primary landing spot, if that makes sense. So now we just cut off journeys, because we have now people now don't have to stop at Independence anymore. They can go to Westport Landing and stop, and then go 3 miles south to the town of Westport. So now Westport's hopping. So it took this happening to have it happen. So it says here, Chouteau's Post to Westport south down current day Warnell Road. That's our longest stretch. And in 1846, Westport Landing was then known as the town of Kansas. And I go a little bit into the founding of Kansas City here in a minute. So what did Westport look like? Because I know that some of us that don't think about the context of Westport today, we think, oh, the business, it's so old. Like, not really. I mean, the businesses and the buildings that stand today are not as old as they would have been back then. So this is the best we can do. Not a lot of photographers back in these days going, let's take a picture of where we live. They were worried about taking their one photo they maybe got in their lifetime. So this is the best shot we have. This is Westport in the 1850s, and if you're looking down the main terminus there, it's Westport Road, which is the Santa Fe Trail, the route. So that's why it's so wide. On the left, you can see a building that probably looks familiar to you. That would be Kelly's today. And on the right, it's a 3-story hotel called the Harris House Hotel. So I'll get into that in a minute. So it took a while, but the whole reason that Westport grew is because he was able to convince that ship to drop that merchandise and then move the merchandise to his store, which then made everyone go, hey, that's a good idea, and then decide to cut their journey down, okay? So again, here's our map. And it tells you there, this is important, there was a massive flood in this area in 1844. It was real bad, okay? Flooded the West Bottoms, flooded the East Bottoms. That's where the West Bottoms used to be known as the French Bottoms, because that's where the French Canadian Catholics had settled earlier on. So this flood actually created a sandbar right where the landing spot was for the Independence Landing. And that only spurred on more people to use Westport Landing. And again, the reason that you'd want to take Westport, that route to Westport, was that you didn't have to cross the Blue River. And there's some great old papers, like published in Liberty, and that talk about like Westport getting all mad, like super pissed off at the New Santa Fe people that are trying to drive traffic to the south and still cross the Blue River. They're like, our roads aren't rocky. You know, I'm like, talking to Kansas City about the roads today, right? So this is just going to show you a little bit of how much development happens in a short amount of time. This is Main Street, and looking north from about 4th. And if you ever notice when you're downtown Kansas City, there's no First Street anymore. And that's because it's cut out now, because they cut out the bluffs. And that's what that is they cut it out with enslaved labor for the most part, and Irish immigrants. So our first influx of Irish immigrants cut our bluffs out. People ask me, where did most of the dirt go? Penn Valley Park today. So that's where all that stuff went. So a little bit about the house and the history of the family that lived there. Good-looking couple, right? And my favorite is, because I've studied all their kids, and my favorite is, they're like, the Harris's 6 beautiful daughters. I'm like, not so sure, but that's Henny is what she was known as, and that's Jack Harris. So it's hard, I know. They were lovely people. No, so they came to Jackson County in 1832, and they came because of cheap land. So a lot of the immigrants from this area came from Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and what did all those places have? Slavery, right? So they bring slavery with them. Of course, Missouri became a slave state in 1821, but in any case, they bring their enslaved people with them. They came from Kentucky. And Jack Harris, Colonel Harris as he was known, with Henrietta and their 7 daughters and 1 son. Like I said they were beautiful. And they built a log cabin where Westport High School sat. So originally that's where they lived. And they were in the business of farming. They were not in the business of hotel or anything Westport related. But you know, you start seeing what's happening in your neighborhood. You're like, wow, my land just became worth more money. Wow, there's a lot of opportunities where I live. And that's in 1848 at the northeast corner, so across the street from where McCoy's Public House used to be. Right there was where the hotel was. And it was a small hotel with a bar. They had enslaved people working there. One of them, Uncle Mark, as they called him, kind of a derogatory term really, but Mark was known for dragging catfish out of the Missouri River, and then she was known for cooking it. I'm like, no, thank you. Not in that river. So the hotel itself actually burned in 1851, and then that's when they built the hotel that looks like this, okay? And this is what stood at 1853 until 1922 when we decided to tear it down. There was a big fight to try to save it, but corporate America won, so it was destroyed. So they called it the Harris House Hotel, which is very confusing because you also have the Harris Kearney House. So there's the Harris House and the Harris House Hotel. This is different. They were making all of their money off of the people who had the money to stay in a hotel before they went out west. So they're going to be catering to the higher end society. Kit Carson stayed there, Thomas Hart Benton, Jim Bridger was known to be there, Sam Houston, Sutter, all of the people were said to have stayed there, and like I said, it was demolished in 1922. So that's going to be at the corner of Westport Avenue and Pennsylvania. You know where Kelly's is? So if you're facing Kelly's, right across the street on the other right-hand side. Yeah. So, and there, that map before I showed, the 3-story brick hotel. We have a wonderful map inside the Harris Kearney house. It's a reproduction of a map that we have, that we actually own, but we are not equipped to have a map in the right climate and temperature, something historic. So it's actually down and framed at the downtown public library, but it is in the original Spalding 1855 map of Westport, and it's incredible. And we have it reproduced, and you can see the drawings of where the houses were. It's incredible. So this house is the one that hopefully you will visit. This is the Harris's home. So they now had the money and the prestige to actually build a beautiful home instead of live inside their hotel. And so in 1855, with the use of enslaved labor, they actually built this home. And it was originally on the corner of Main Street and Westport Road on the southwest corner, okay? And about 3 acres there. Yeah, what's that? Where Cat's Drug is, the unpaid research assistant says. So it was right there, and they had a large yard where they could overlook. It was big time to be able to overlook the trails, you know, kind of have the view. And they also had peacocks in their yard, I read. I mean, like, what? Some fancy stuff for that woman to have. And then, interestingly, in the same year that the hotel was torn down, this house was in danger of being torn down. And in order for them to build things like Cat's Drugs, they actually had to raise the money, and this was originally the Daughters of Old Westport, raise the money to literally raise the house and move it. So that picture in the corner is actually the house being hoisted up 1922 and moved to where it sits today at 4000 Baltimore. It's in 2 pieces, so it has an addition off the back that was built. You can kind of see it behind the historic marker over there. That addition was built in about 1870, but the original front part of the house is the 1855 house. And of course, they would have had, you know, a kitchen detached and all those buildings. All of that stuff is lost. But what we have today is still the house, thanks to these organizations that actually cared about their history and wanted to make sure that it wasn't torn down. And speaking of, I wanted to focus on her. I always say it's Black History Month, but every month should be everybody's History Month. We shouldn't just devote a month. Like, we should be having this conversation all the time. So one of the things that I learned, I love records. I'm a loser. I spend way too much time and I had a kid ask me maybe 2 years ago, "Are you fluent in cursive?" "Miss Euston, you fluent in cursive?" I said, "I'm an expert in cursive." So I read old records all the time, and I can go through many stories of all the rabbit holes I've gone under, but I wanted to kind of talk about Hattie. So when you go to Harris Kearney House, we are part of the Stopping Stones Project, which is a national project that is through the Endowment of the Humanities to recognize enslaved people and their stories. And Hattie's story is recognized, but the story that was told to get recognized turned out to not be the truth, is what I found out. So I want to tell you a little bit about the true story of Hattie. We have a room dedicated to her. As you can see, her headstone says Hattie Drisdom Kearney. Charles Kearney was John and Henrietta Harris. He married one of those beautiful daughters, Josephine, and they're the ones that actually took over the ownership of the home after John and Henrietta passed away. So this is the only photo we have of her, which is not great, I know, but it is really of her. So I want to just kind of give you, I'm not going to read all this because of time, but I'm going to just give you the basic story. So the whitewash story is that there was this little enslaved girl, about 12 years old, who was at an auction, a slave auction, being sold in Westport, and Charles Kearney, he's the hero of the story. Charles Kearney sees this, and he didn't own slaves, he didn't believe in that, but she goes running up to him and begs him to buy her, "Please save me," and he did, and he spent a bunch of money on her for the time, $1,300. That is a lot of money for the time. That was a lot. And this is, around 1854, 55. He said he didn't know her. And then he ended up freeing her before the Civil War. And she stayed with the family the whole time. And she was the only Black person buried in the white section of the family, but she's buried with the family. So you can read into that what you want. She didn't die until it was 1928. So in any case, this is Hattie's story, and I want to tell it a little bit here. I actually said, there's got to be, the primary sources that were there were people that did know Hattie, but they were also some people that grew up with slaves in their household. So I wanted to know if there was more to the story, if we could figure it out, and I figured it out. So I wanted to know what happened. So she had the surname Drisden, which is not common, and it led me to this. So I won't get into this. This is how I spend my 2 o'clock in the mornings, okay? I was able to figure out that Hattie was part of a bigger network of enslaved people in the area, to the point where I know she's related to a guy named Bedford Drisden, who's buried up in Lawrence, and he started the first black church in Lawrence. He was educated. He was able to free himself and his wife. There's so much history here, and they're all enslaved by the same family, or were enslaved, which was the Simpson family. And remember that beautiful woman I showed you, I was talking about Jack and Henrietta Harris. Henrietta Harris was a Simpson, so her whole family enslaved this family. So Hattie knew these people, so she was actually purchased by the same family, if that makes sense. He did free her. This is her enslavement record. This is actually her in the inventory of this guy up there, Duke Simpson's probate, and he was one of the original settlers of Westport. So I was able to find all that, and I've been able to, now I have all of these enslaved people, and I've been able to track them to Lawrence. I have their names that they took after they were emancipated or freed themselves, and now I'm trying to piece it all together so we can tell that story too. So again, it's not all about the history. My goal at Westport Historical Society is to tell all the stories of the people that were part of the community and not just one family. Last thing I'm just going to really briefly say, because I'm running out of time, is Possum Trot. Kansas City's original name could have been Possum Trot, but I think it's because they were all wasted and they thought it'd be funny, to be clear. So 1838 is when the actual sale of the land, 260 acres in downtown, what is downtown Kansas City today, 14 men, all very well-known surnames that you'd know, like McGee, et cetera, piled their money together and said, let's put a city here. And what are we going to name it? They sat around at One-Eyed Ellis's cabin. I don't know who he is. I'm trying to figure it out. And they drank a bunch, and their names that they were thinking about were Rabbitville, Possum Trot, and they settled on the town of Kansas. And to be clear, that was before Kansas Territory existed. So this is 1838. It's Indian territory. So if anybody ever says, Kansas City, you stole our name, you can fight this very easily, because Kansas City, or I should say Kansas, stole our name, actually, because we had it first. So this becomes what is downtown Kansas City today. So if you go down into the river market and you notice the shift, you actually go sideways, because he platted the town, that's McCoy's plat on the left, he platted the town to the river and not on a north-south grid. And the same thing is true about Westport. It's platted. That's why you take a big turn to go on Westport Road, is because it was platted to the Santa Fe Trail and not on a north-south grid. So that is the original. And speaking of really attractive people, there are some of our white founders. Those are the ones that we know about. William Gillis is the top center. He's the one I wrote my 125-page thesis on. But there's so much history around us, and I always say this: history is not the past, but a map of the past drawn from a particular point of view to be useful to the modern traveler. So we kind of have to remember where we come from. There's so much history around us. You can be interested in little pieces of it, all of it. I can go on about random topics about anything, but I always say there's layers of history, like we're standing on if the ground could talk, right? You always have to think about what was there before us, and we are only part of the story of Kansas City. We're today's story of Kansas City, and there's a lot that happened before us. So I got pretty good. I did pretty good on that, you guys. I'm just saying. 30 on the dot.
Thanks. One more for. Yeah, I cannot imagine them announcing Super Bowl champions, the Possum Trot Chiefs.
Oh, I say it all the time.
No, I don't
Here
think
come the Rabbitville Royals.
that wouldn't have worked.
They were
any
drunk.
Questions?
So the majority of the founders were slaveholders,
Mhm.
and most of them came from
Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. Most of really this area is real high saturation of really Kentucky, Tennessee. A lot of them, because Virginia, I said Kentucky got broken off from a larger portion of Virginia later, but it was a lot of it had to do with the Appalachians and the fact that the land was over-farmed, so it was extremely expensive and not profitable anymore. So a lot of them moved, and the first person to bring, they say, enslaved people to the area is the McGee family, and they were one of many, and it's an influx, and they're my friends now, and and they're great people, but just saying, they are. And they embrace their history, all of it, I'll tell you that.
All right, question from Daryl.
This is not directly related, but have you come across Junius Groves and the Potato King?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's a great story, actually. Junius Groves, he was an exoduster who moved to Kansas City, Kansas, Edwardsville area, and then became a millionaire because he was had a potato farm. And there was actually a mini docudrama that appeared on PBS about him that's very good. And then I'm actually just Friday was with the same director. I worked over the summer with on KCPT this coming Thursday at 7 p.m. There is a story about Sara Rector, richest black girl in America. I'm very involved with that. If you saw Sarah's Oil, I was helping with the producers, make sure the story was told as accurately as possible. And there's a mini docudrama. I play the awkward historian at the table. I play myself, basically.
I guess I was struck a little bit when you pointed out the Santa Fe Trail.
Yeah.
How straight that was. So you said it was set up for commercials, so it was
commercial
surveyed
highway
and everything to make it
well,
so straight?
And that's the thing, like early on, and you guys know this, how many times I do it all the time. It's like when you go to cut through something, even in your backyard or whatever, like even if you have a path, if it's quicker to go the other way, you go the other way, you know what I mean? So they're going around, this area is very hilly. They're going around a lot of hills and ravines, and this area had no trees, but they were going around things. So originally it cut through, but over time, as people bought land, they didn't want you cutting through their land anymore. You guys know where Avila University is? Okay, it's on the Santa Fe Trail, and it goes like this. There's a road that goes around it, it wraps around. It wasn't originally like that, but when the guy, John Mercer Wells, bought the land there, he said, get off my lawn, And so that's why the trail goes like this, and it did that starting in the 1840s, 1850s, is because they didn't want you cutting through the land. So you see that sort of, it just kind of depends. Yeah.
All right, I think this is going to be our last question.
So I recognized a lot of names of places and some of the terms that you were referring to because of a lot of locations across the city and
Yeah.
even restaurants
Mm-hmm.
that either were or are still
Like
a part
Port Fonda?
yeah,
Yeah.
the Kansas City landmarks.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some things that maybe would surprise us that come from the history that are a part of like the terminology we use or the
That's a
places
great
we
question.
see?
I'm trying to think. What's that? I was actually, somebody always, when are you going to write a book? And I go, are you a publisher? That's what I say back. So one of the things, that's a great question. There are certain things that are somewhat named after, but like a lot of parks end up, well, that's sort of true. A lot of parks end up named after families, but then a lot of times too, the city loves to name them after like former city council people, and then they take away those names. Have you ever noticed that? It's interesting. But then the biggest thing in Kansas City is our road system. So those early dudes, once they were living on their farms, they were like, wow, this city's really growing. I'm going to plot my farm out. And so they plot their farms out, okay? And then they named the roads after family members. So there was McGee, had Eleanor Street, James Street. Holmes Road comes from them too, Holmes. And only some of those street names survived. And everybody lost their street name for the most part if you were north-south because it turned into, numbers. But some of those names survived, but as they cut through the city, they got organized over time and said, we can't have McGee Street turn into Turner Street. So the name would survive for certain streets and not for others. So street names is like one of our biggest legacies. A lot of people ask me about Troost Avenue. Troost is the first doctor in Kansas City. He was a big part of my thesis too. He never lived on Troost Avenue. I was just talking to somebody just last night who said he had a bunch of slaves and he lived on truce and he was like the biggest slaveholder. That's not true. He did have slaves, to be clear, but he lived at downtown Kansas City. That's where he lived. And the street became named after him because he was the first doctor. They're like, we got to name something after him, you know? That's what happened. And of course, they were not humble back then. They're like, I need a street, you know? But notice there's no McCoy Street, but there used to be. So again, it's that, if you look at kind of those old maps, so I always say if I were to write a book, I could write a book literally telling the story of Kansas City through street names, you know? Because just tell the story of the McGees and tell the story, like Vine Street's named after a woman. You know, so like there's lots of different things that can come from that. There's really not any surprising that I can think of off the top, like surprising things. I like where they used to think they might place the Scout statue, you know. They were gonna put it in front of Union Station at one point, and then luckily they put it where they did after, they moved it a couple times. Electric Park is another good one. So down in Rieger, down there, done a great job retelling the story of Electric Park. The first amusement park was down in the East Bottoms. And there's a park called Heim Park down there, named after the Heim family that was the brewers that started that. They just did it so they could get people to come to get their beer. They weren't really in the the amusement park game. They're like, come and get our fresh beer. Yeah, the Walt Disney connection, the Little White City, Walt Disney getting his inspiration from Electric Park was going to be the one that was at off of Paseo, so where like the headquarters of Gates is today. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I could tell a story if this ground could talk. And if you go to the Harris Kearney, when you go to the Harris Kearney house, the brick that leads up, the pathway that leads up to the house is actually the bricks from the Harris House Hotel. So they did save those and they reused them. And we're going to use some of the old bricks to build kind of an enslaved monument piece, talking about the enslavement of Westport. The stuff I've researched, we're going to use some of those bricks we couldn't use because of, we had to replace a lot because of, age. But we're going to recycle those into a project that will be telling that better part of that story, not just Hattie's story. Any other?
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
That was very good. I got to say, I was born and raised in Texas, and Texas is a little bit self-centered about their own history. So it's been interesting to move to this part of the world and learn the history of this area and St. Louis and all of that. So very good. Thank you for that. I really enjoyed that. All right. In just a moment, I'll be passing the volunteer task cards basket. Please grab one that you can accomplish today after our meeting concludes. And once you've finished the task, return the note card to the done purple box in the lobby near the drink station. All the cleaning supplies you might need are in the white cabinet in the foyer, right by the lemonade. We need everyone, yes, you, to help keep this place looking great. We're a entirely 100% volunteer operation. So thank you for that. And let me go ahead and just pass these around. I'll start these with Gilbert here. You can send them. All right. And while our musicians are coming back to the stage, we want to thank all those who are monthly donors that help KC Oasis running. Kansas City Oasis is a 501c3 nonprofit run solely on donations and volunteers. If you liked the topics and music today, please consider donating through kcoasis.org or donate or by Venmo. Our Venmo information can be found at the merch table in the lobby, as well as cash donation jars. Recurring monthly donations through our website are the most helpful. And once again, I switched over to the new donation method because they didn't take such a big old cut of the money. So, all right, that brings us back to the Bledsoes for one last song. And don't forget got a cash tip jar there for them. And Do you have any? Are you scheduled to play here locally anytime real soon, or?
Oh yes, Tuesday we'll be at the Ship.
Okay, the Ship. You already. Yeah,
It's a
okay.
full band thing with
Yeah.
pedal steel and drums and a vocalist. And
Okay.
we have a special guest from Bogota. We're going to do some Tejano rancheras. It's going to be a fun night.
Okay. Will you be playing in Mountain View, Arkansas anytime soon?
We've been there. We just go there for fun. We
Yeah,
love that
right.
place. Okay, this next one features my 50-year-old son, Aiden Bledsoe. He's going to sing Hey Good Lookin' by the Hillbilly Shakespeare, Hank Williams Sr. And thank you so much. A round of applause for the champ, Maya Bledsoe, 11 years old. Aiden Bledsoe. And I'm Beau Bledsoe, and thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I rarely get to play these old traditional pieces, so it's a real honor to have such a fine audience.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Hey, sweet baby, don't you think maybe we could find us a brand new recipe? I got a hot rod Ford and a $2 bill, and I know a spot right over the hill. There's soda pop and the dancing's free, so if you wanna have fun, come along with me. Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Free and ready, so we can go steady. How's about saving all your time for me? No more looking, I know I've been tooken. How's about keeping steady company? I'm gonna throw my day book over the fence and find me one for 5 or 10 cents. Keep it till it's covered with age, 'cause I'm writing your name down on every page. Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
That was great. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Don't forget, we did send a sign-up list there for the tour of the home. The name of that home? Yeah, the Harris home tour. So that's 2:30. Is that right? 2:30 when the tour starts? Or 2? Okay. All right. If you don't do it today, be sure you do it eventually. So, all right. If you can't find the time to do that today, for those that want to go to lunch after this, you can join us at the Tower Tavern, 401 East 31st Street, Kansas City, Missouri. And next Sunday, the featured speaker will be Stuart Hines on the Gay and Lesbian Archive of Mid-America. The musical guest, Tim Amy, and Community Moment by John Muter. And please help keep this area clean, pick up and pitch in, and again, our volunteer operations. So we want to thank again this week's presenters, Diane and Sara, and musicians, Beau, Aiden, and Maya. And thank you for being here or tuning in online on Facebook Live. See you next week.